WTF is up with the GTR? It's too fast, too furious, and was specifically engineered to destroy everything in its path. But after over a dinosaur decade of production in its current form, and with Nissan on the brink of extinction, the monster is officially dead. This is the story of a car that forever changed how cars were built. It changed how we viewed car culture as a whole, and it made no compromises in pushing the technological envelope. This is the rundown on Godzilla, the Nissan GTR. In 1964, at the second ever Japanese Grand Prix at the Suzuka circuit, Prince driver Yoshikazu Sunko took a Skyline 2000 GT sedan and passed the most dominant Porsche 904 race car on one of Suzuka's sweeping turns. This was the very moment that Godzilla was born. Sunoko's car's ability to best the Germans' engineering marvel made millions of fans stop and think, what the just happened? You see, that Skyline 2000 GT was the work of Shinichiro Sakurai, a Prince Motors head that was tasked with building a race car for the company. And after his fleet of 2000 GTs dominated that race, getting 2nd through 6th, they wanted to build a road version. So, how'd they go about that? Well, they actually started using actual race car engines for starters. Duh! Prince decided that their recently developed R380 prototype racer had the perfect engine to sneak under the hood of their impending sports sedan. Dubbed the S20, it was a 2-liter straight 6D tuned to make 160 horsepower, and it sounded, well, like rough sex. And as we all know, Godzilla doesn't do sensual. It's all rough, like city flattening, skyscraper crushing rough. Forget romantic candles, the only sparks flying here are from a downed power grid. Yeah. And this 19 emphasis on the 69 GTR was an engineering masterpiece. And compared to the stuff that America was building at the time, this engine was decades ahead. And that would continue to be true all the way until the 1990s, but we'll get to that in just a second. Anyways, couple the S20 engine with a sleek and beautiful body design, as well as semi-trailing arm suspension, and you've got the finished product. The very first Nissan GTR. GTR became the definition of sports car. It handled like nothing else that you could find on the streets, made insane noises, and sported a design that makes today's cars look, uninspired at best. The 160 horsepower S20 was loved by tuners because you could easily get this thing to 200 horsepower with some tweaks. And this engine is the one that began the vibrant JDM tuner culture we would all see decades later. And while it was good on the street, it was great wheel to wheel. Because, well, in case you guys forgot, this was derived from 2 different race cars. So you best believe they took this baddie racing. And when they did, the GTR took the competition and wiped that tarmac with them, garnering a monstrous 49 race wins during its career. This specific GTR also holds a nickname that every enthusiast should know, Hakosuka. It's derived from the Japanese words Hako, meaning boxy, and the first part of Skarian, meaning scenic mountain road. Hakosuka. Yeah, and in case you want to not embarrass yourself at Cars and Coffee, it is definitely pronounced Hakosuka. Trust me. Take it from me. I'm your guy on the internet, right? Like, subscribe, and it's Hakos, right? In 1971, the GTR Coupe debuted with a wider body, a shorter wheelbase, and slightly more angry design. It also got a big rear spoiler and wider tires to increase downforce and overall grip on the track. But this was just the beginning. Welcome to 1973, and well, this second-gen GTR was an unforeseen mess, like ex-girlfriend messy, and it wasn't Nissan's fault, believe it or not. Never is, right? Internally coded the KPG C110, this car had the unfortunate luck of debuting at the onset of the gas crisis. Low emission standards, power deductions, and basically everything not specifically made for fuel economy was dumped. The GTR fell right into that pit. As a result, only 197 GTR units were produced during this 1-year run, which is why real examples go for like a gazillion dollars now. This is the listing for a car that sold for $430K. Yeah, that's insane. And if you got one, give me a call at 567-5309 because my girl Jenny, she'd like to do a review on one. It was still a GTR though, no doubt. They kept the S20 and the first-gen suspension, with the only main differences being the American muscle car-inspired design and the four-wheel disc brakes, making it the very first Japanese car to ever have them. Safety. But the regulatory issues meant this GTR, which was bred for the track, well, it never went racing. It's a shame. Throughout the 70s and the early 80s, Nissan kept selling the second-gen Skyline, but once fuel regs finally came back to normal, Shinichiro Sakurai fell ill and had to task his apprentice, Nagarani Ito, to lead the newest Skyline generation, the R31. But Ito's creation wasn't what he had envisioned. The R31 was too normal for a lot of enthusiasts. It was simple, reliable, and not as groundbreaking as previous Skylines and GTRs. And because of that, the GTR variant couldn't be justified. Only a few cool sporty trims. Ivo was devastated to let down his mentor, and with the lukewarm reception of the R31, things were looking pretty bleak. For a while, it seemed like the flame of the Nissan GTR, it was fading.
Unbelievable! McQueen is fading!
But then Nissan said, that motherfucker! It may have been more than a decade since the first GTR, but Nissan was ready for a revenge tour. Enter the R32. You see, Naganori Ito was pissed off and he was in an absolute crunch. Skyline. Sakurai was getting even older and even closer to death, and after the R31's blunder, Ito had to deliver a Skyline that would live up to the original. He and his team went to work day and night, absolutely grinding to create a car with one goal, one mission, one legacy: to dominate Japanese tour car racing. And this here is exactly what they did to get it done. All-wheel drive system for the first time in GTR's history, a completely refreshed twin-turbo straight-line 6, aka the legendary RB26 DETT, a rear-wheel active steering system, a brand new extra sporty design, and a completely fresh suspension setup. And yeah, I know, all this stuff sounds pretty normal for a new sports car today, but in 1989, this thing was supernatural. That Atessa all-wheel drive system was developed because Nissan saw what Porsche was doing with the 959, and Nissan actually bought one. Big money. Not only to understand its magical mechanics, but to internally benchmark their new GTR against it. The Atessa system was essentially a newer, more compact, and overall better version of the Porsche system, mostly because it didn't send power to the front wheels at all times, but instead only added front bias when the system detected slippage. Ooh, I might have to go get that checked out by a doc. One sec. And we're back. Oh, and that active rear steering? That was something Nissan kinda invented. I mean, funny enough, Porsche now uses that tech on their modern cars. Pretty full circle, huh? Anyways, as for the RB26, did you know that its factory 276 horsepower rating was complete bull? Yes, sir. The gentleman's agreement in Japan at the time had every single performance car advertised at 276 in order to avoid a dangerous horsepower war. America. In reality, the R32 GTRs were making at least 300 to the wheels right off of the production line. Immediately upon its release in 1989, the R32 GTR set the Nürburgring lap time record, becoming the best performance mass-produced car you could buy anywhere in the world. In the same year, it entered the Japanese Touring Car Championships and it won everything. 29 wins in 29 races. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, in any racing series that was as dominant, as dynamic, or as fast around a track than the R32. I mean, I'm sure that you've seen that iconic blue Calsonic GTR race car, the car that we all fell in love with in Gran Turismo. It's probably the most legendary R32 of all the R32s, but that car didn't earn the iconic nickname. It actually came from a smaller racing team named Gibson, who were amazing on their own, building most of their Nismo-tuned race cars in-house because of how expensive the parts were from Nissan's factory. And it was their car, a stylish, retro, red, white, and blue GTR, that won 3 consecutive Australian Touring Car Championships from 1990 to 1992, leveling the competition no matter where it came ashore. And well, that led to Aussie motorsport reporters coming up with probably the most iconic nickname in automotive history, Godzilla. After just 4 short years of the R32's reign, Nissan was ready for an update, and naturally, well, next in line was the R33 GTR, because That's how they do it in Japan. They count, from 1 to 2 to 32 to 33. Now, this one is considered somewhat of the redheaded middle child of the GTR family, kind of like my bro Trav. Dad? Trav? But what actually the public opinion gets wrong is just how big of an improvement the R33 was. Rather than being a rebodied R32 like the 15-year-old JDM kids might want to think, the R33 was a near ground-up evolution of everything the R32 did so well. The most apparent differences is that curvy, delicious, dare I say sensual new sheet metal. Not like that rough 69. Well, either way that you like it, the new, more slippery body panels weren't just for improving aero, which they did, but the lightweight steel material helped to save weight, which was good seeing as this car had grown in virtually every dimension possible. The all-wheel drive system was largely redesigned and allowed the R33 to better split the torque between each individual wheel, and everything from the suspension, braking, chassis rigidity, and engine reliability were cranked up for the R33. All things that would allow this GTR to once again set a production car record at the Green Hell. This time, it was over 20 seconds faster than the R32, despite being 100 pounds heavier and with no additional horses. See, kids, it's not all about horsepower. Stay in school. And that's kind of the main thing about the R33 GTR. It was more capable in almost every single way than the R32, and doesn't even get the recognition for it. Not everybody gets trophies anymore. So, here's some cool bits of info about it. It marked the 40th anniversary of the Skyline, which Nissan commemorated by having Autech build 400 sedan versions, just like the OG GTR sedans. In 1995, the absolute drool-inducing R33 GTR LM finished in the top 10 at the legendary 24-hour of Le Mans. This generation also marked the launch of the Gran Turismo game in 1997, where you could buy an R33 GTR of your own for like 50,000 credits. And there was a bunch of hot and spicy variants too, like the 3 series of V-Spec GTRs, the LM Limited, which commemorated the LM race car's entry into Le Mans, and like a dozen more different special editions that if I tried to cover all in this video, you'd probably want me dead, so I'll finish with this. The holy grail of R33s, the car that single-handedly tore up the 276 horsepower gentleman's agreement, the all-powerful and all-knowing R33 GTR 400R. Yeah. These guys came with a modified 2.8 liter version of the RB26 that made, you guessed it, 400 horsepower. Each one was hand-built in-house by Nismo, and despite planning on building 100 examples, just 44 ever left the factory. But while the R33 will forever deserve more flowers, its impact will be dwarfed forever by what comes next. The R34 GTR! The car that was created when the automotive gods cast a lightning bolt down and struck the chiseled jawline of Paul Walker. R.I.P. bro. That guy was a hottie. Okay, yeah, that didn't happen as far as I know, but with this one, Nissan did what they do best. Take something amazing and just make it way better. Right off the bat, just to show that they meant business, Nissan included an optional multifunctional display that gave you a G-force meter, a lap timer, an electric boost gauge, a part, by the way, that was programmed by Polyphony Digital, the makers of the Gran Turismo series. Yeah, cool. But the most obvious changes were on the outside, of course. While the R33 rounded out the harsher edges of the R32 design, R34 did the opposite and brought back the sharper lines and boxy presence everyone loved. And believe it or not, this new dad bod style was more slippery than the R33 aerodynamically. And that gorgeous wing? Yikes! Hurt my eyeballs. It had 4 different spoiler blade angle settings depending on what kind of driving you were doing. But the juiciest bit of all that, well, is the RB26 DETT. It was back and it was beefier than ever, with stuff like a reinforced block, improved airflow, new cams, and new ball bearing turbo internals that increased both spool time and reliability. Officially, all this new great stuff gave the R34 a 276 horsepower output, but say it with me, that's bulldong! What, you didn't think I was going to say that? Sorry. Just like the previous Gentleman's Agreement era GTRs, the R34 made quite a bit more than advertised. This one was believed to make more like 330. Peek under the skirt and the signature Atessa all-wheel drive system got a Pro added to the end of its name. That meant that it could not only dictate power to the front wheels, but it could also manage the right to left power delivery in the rear with an active differential. And all of this stuff that I've mentioned allowed the GTR to, once again, Jesus, how many times am I going to have to say this? Smashed the Nürburgring lap record. This time it did it in 7 minutes and 52 seconds, passing the R33's time by more than 7 seconds. But records and numbers just tell one small sliver of the R34's story, because it was this GTR that became car culture when it was featured as Brian O'Connor's car in 2002's Too Fast, Too Furious. What up, Luda? This gem of Japanese tuning culture and underground street racing injected new life into not just the aftermarket community, but the automotive industry as a whole. We even got the R34 in video games like Overdrive 4 or Gran Turismo 2. Real ones know, right? Yeah. This car represented everything we loved about the GTR, but simply cranked it up. And things got even hotter after its 1998 release when the special edition started to roll out. And by God, there were even more now. There was, of course, the V-Spec, then there was the homologation special V-Spec N1, then there was the V-Spec 2, V-Spec 2 N1, and M-Spec, and then the V-Spec NER and M-Spec NER models, and much like the R33, too many to get into this video. And, oh yeah, there was also the R34 cop car that was confirmed in a recent spotting, so there's that. But if there is one R34 variant to discuss, it's this one, the final iteration, the R34 GTR Nismo Z tune. The 500 horsepower, 2.8 liter version of the RB engine, a sack suspension setup, and special bimbo brakes. These Z-Tune cars were built at the very end of the production line, and all of them were used V-Spec 2s that Nissan bought back and hand-built from scratch. In 2003, just 19 individual Z-Tunes were produced. All except one were painted in Z-Tune silver, and that last car was painted in the most valuable GTR color ever made, midnight purple, making it the single greatest factory Skyline GTR ever produced. But rewind, because even before the Z-Tune R34s, something new was cooking at Nissan HQ. Oh baby. All the way back in 2001, Nissan revealed the GTR concept, a freaky looking spaceship that was drawn up by the same guy who worked on the design team for the R34 GTR, the S13 Silvia, and the S14 Silvia. We didn't know it then, but Nissan began creating a brand new car from the ground up over the next 6 years. And what came out the other side, you ask? 2007 was utterly ridiculous. Dubbed the R35, this GTR was no longer a Skyline, but it was only a GTR, causing no confusion as to what this car was about. Pure performance. And yes, if you forgot, this generation GTR was the first to be sold legally abroad, meaning it had some serious new competition. Think Chevy Corvette ZR1, Porsche 911 Turbo, Audi R8, the Dodge Viper, Ferrari 458, and the Lamborghini Gallardo 2. Luigi. He would drive one of those, wouldn't he? And to help fight off those legendary cars, the GTR had an ace up its sleeve, the new, but now infamous VR38DETT. Conceptualized in Nissan's Yokohama plant, each 3.8-liter twin-turbocharged V6 is hand-assembled by just a handful of master engineers known as Takumi. And because of the extensive development of this engine, Nissan was initially able to churn out 478 horsepower from the VR and send it to all four wheels. Result? The GTR could sprint to 60 in just 3.2 seconds. And I gotta say, in 2007, this thing was like a UFO. It was from the future and it felt like an iPhone on wheels. But today, feels like one of the most analog supercar slayers ever built. Whoa. This budget supercar cooked up a magic sauce that questioned everything we thought about supercars, from how they perform to what they should cost. The GTR's bang for buck ratio scared the headlights out of premium brands that were asking hundreds of thousands of dollars for a car with similar or less performance. All I can say is that the world should have been paying more attention to the GTRs of the past, because the R35 took the legacy of winning, ran with it at Mach Jesus. In its first year on sale, the GTR posted a quicker Nürburgring lap time than the then current 911 Turbo that cost over $50,000 more, which is why in 2010, well, Porsche came out with the Turbo S. And in the same year, the GTR returned to the racetrack and won the Super GT Championship, even after the rules required it to put a weighed-down 200-pound ballast in the back. And by 2012, it had won back-to-back GT class championships. The GTR would go on to be crowned as the fastest production car ever at the Goodwood Festival of Speed's hill climb and remain a lap record goblin at tracks around the globe. But we can't all forget about Nismo, right? Yes, sir. In 2013, Nissan released the GTR Nismo version that unleashed a demonic 600 horsepower thanks to turbochargers pulled out of the freaking GT3 race car. And surprise, surprise, it set another Nürburgring lap record. The R35 stands as one of the most important automotive cultural phenomena in the 21st century. It showed up in movies, video games, and sank its claws deep into the younger generation of enthusiasts who weren't old enough to experience the dominance of the GTRs in the 80s and 90s. And that brings us back to today, where we enjoy the most capable, fast, and technologically advanced GTRs of all time. And I wrote this love letter to the GTR when I was around 12, so could you be nice? You're more than a car. You're a revolution. From the moment the R32 earned the nickname Godzilla, you've terrified racetracks and humbled supercars worldwide. The R33 refined your brutal force, proving that raw power could dance with elegance. The R34 cemented your legacy with iconic styling, relentless engineering, and a starring role in my dreams and my movies. Then came the R35, the fucking technological juggernaut that redefined speed and made performance accessible to everyone. You're not just legendary because of power or precision, it's your ability to evolve while staying true to your roots. Here's to Godzilla, the king that never fell.